Cool. Hopefully you can see my screen. Yeah, I think I can see it as well. Cool. So I'm going to start. I think I have about 45 minutes, something like that. So hi, my name's Danny Bluestone. Today I'm going to talk about why a people-focused culture that we have here at Cyberduck has really helped us to digitally transform. So it's the story of Cyberduck. We're a UX-focused digital transformation agency here in London. Hopefully next year it will all be in person again, but it's still kind of fun doing things on Hop-in as well, I guess from a convenience perspective. So the story today is over the last year and a half, we've gone through at Cyberduck a profound digital transformation. We became remote first as a business, but managed to become much more efficient, and we grew both in size and obviously profitability. So today I'm just going to explain why this people focused culture that we have here has supported that growth. I'm just going to check with everyone that they can see my screen and everything's okay. Yep, cool. So I'll just continue because I can't sort of hear you or see you really. But yeah, sounds like that's good. So just to introduce myself, I've had a keen interest in design and technology from a very, very young age. I used to design CD-ROMs, flash games, HTML back in the day. Eventually took a sort of postgraduate degree where I discovered the wonderful world of information architecture, interaction design, which eventually led into a very strong career in UX. And I ended up working for multiple agencies and noticed that they lacked the right type of processes, methodologies, and ultimately culture to really deliver complex web systems. So today, Cyberduck specializes in digital transformation through qualitative research, design, thinking, and an accredited design process. We also specialize in Drupal, so proud to be part of the community, which is why we're talking here today. We also deliver Laravel work as well, and we work with clients like the Commonwealth, Sport England, and the European Central Bank, helping them with complex transformation projects in digital. So in terms of me, the person, I was born in the 70s and had the privilege to grow up in two countries, so the UK and Israel, two very, very different cultures. So that kind of led me to meeting people from all over the world, all races, all religions. And I became very entrepreneurial as a kid, in Startup Nation, became a DJ, and my shameless plug is that my brother, the middle kid on the left-hand side, is a famous electronic music producer. So he's a touring DJ, which is something that he was much better than I was, which is why he took that sort of type of career, and I ended up going down more the corporate route. With my wife, Anna, we have two little young kids who are doing a little twirl here. Just thought it was a great way to start the day, looking at kids doing twirls. And I guess what I do as a hobby is just sort of sport to kind of unwind and stuff like that. So obviously you saw my professional self, you saw my personal self, and what I love to do is to bring all of myself to work. And that's what I also love when I sort of hire people. They don't just bring their professional self to work, they bring their personal self to work as well. And equally, I think we all take our professional self back home, so it kind of works in reverse as well. So what really inspires me is this particular quote from the Bible. If everybody is taught how to fish, everybody benefits. And I believe the best teachers have this type of inclusive mentality that they want to help everybody and empower everyone. And that's exactly how I think. So in terms of like my own personal mission, I love the diversity of the A team. I love how the team used to come together. So this is a famous 80s box set, for those that don't know. I love the fact that the team was so diverse. Obviously, this was the 1980s, so diversity wasn't exactly a big thing in those days. But essentially, they worked together as a unit, as a team, and they were much better together. And as Hannibal Smith used to say, I love it when a plan comes together. And so when I kind of started CyberDuck, I had this type of work ethic. So before I started CyberDuck, I saw massive web systems being delivered without user research or documentation. So one of the books that made a huge impact on me was the Toyota Management System, which was all about lean management and the three pillars of quality, people, and continual improvement. So that kind of focus on the people culture was there also from various business books that I read, and obviously Toyota being the world's most profitable and one of the largest automotive companies really made a dent in my universe. So I'm particularly proud of the growth that my team has achieved in the last 18 months. So I just wanted to show you some data nuggets so you really understand the context here. So in the last couple of years, I guess 18 months, we've grown our profits sort of massively. It's incredibly hard in an agency to do this. Obviously, what was this down to? So obviously, as well as the culture, there was a fantastic kind of sales initiative, account management as well. And what we actually found is that the pandemic and working from home massively boosted the outputs, reduced travel time. It gave the team a lot more quality bandwidth to focus on delivering work. So it was really interesting as well. So yeah, I mean, obviously it was phenomenal to see the sort of level of profitability. In terms of client satisfaction, massively improved. We put a big focus sort of in 2017-18 on process optimization. And really kind of worked very hard on the end-to-end life cycle here at CyberDuck, in particular looking at things like the acceptance criteria from all the way from kind of research and UX to kind of obviously engineering and testing. So that obviously had a massive kind of dent really on to the better, of course, on client satisfaction. And interestingly, we to deliver all of the projects that we essentially won really, and kind of the accounts that we continued. I mean, we did have like 65% of our clients every year were previous clients. We had and still have a fantastic retention rates. But essentially, we grew the team by about 60 people in the last sort of 18 months. We went from about 40 people to about 100 people in a year and a half as well. And then obviously, clearly, one of the main barometers that we looked at was staff satisfaction. So we used something we don't use this anymore, but something called the ENPS score. So it's essentially like how likely is an employee of CyberDuck likely to recommend CyberDuck to a friend. So we massively improved the numbers over the last sort of 4 to 5 years. We did end up switching this kind of barometer to another one, which I'll show you later. But yeah, obviously, clearly this was a testament that something was working well in the business. So when we talk about a culture, what do we actually mean? So let's just take one step back and ask ourselves, what is a company? So actually the word company comes from a Latin word called the people that eat bread with you or break bread. So it's actually a company is more like a group of people that are breaking bread together. That's essentially what the true word means. And a company is not a system. The people that we work with are essentially human beings, with motivations, emotions, desires. And when we hear about some businesses where, and I meet these kind of delivery people every day where they have to deliver 250 parcels a day. Some of them have to end up peeing in bottles because they don't hit their targets and they don't have time to even go to the toilet. This is a sign that something is going badly wrong. So why a culture? So I really like this particular quote: "A nation stays alive when its culture stays alive." This is one of the mottos from those working at the National Museum of Afghanistan, which sadly will now struggle to keep this promise. As you know, there's been some tragic events in that country. But whilst this applies to nations, it also applies to businesses. A culture that focuses on inclusion, improvements, innovation, in keeping its kind of vision and purpose alive, will succeed. And those without these sorts of cultures will not. But let's take a step back. Before we have a culture, we need a purpose. So for me, the reason to get into digital was to use my design and I guess web development gift to make people's lives richer, better, healthier, and ultimately cascade information, transactional functionality to people, to users, so it actually works really, really quickly for them, and it becomes a pleasurable experience. So what you see in the photo here, this is our work for the Commonwealth. So we support the Commonwealth's websites, are in the process of doing a big redesign, but have been helping them now for quite a few years. And essentially, if we can deliver information to users quickly, that can be life transforming for these individuals. If, for example, it used to take somebody 3 to 4, 5 minutes to find some information, and they couldn't make decisions because of that potentially has real world implications on that community or that person. So for me, it's not about coding or design or UX or even running a business. It's about helping people and making the world a better place to live in. And we also need a positive culture, because the fourth industrial revolution is here. Digital is only further advancing, right? It's the third industrial revolution was essentially the kind of the internet, but now things are progressing even further. And recent world events, including climate change, the pandemic, or COVID-19, they've led to unprecedented disruptions affecting every aspect of global industry and calling for a great reset. So it's resulted in more and more voices, not only from outside businesses, but from inside businesses, from colleagues who have like a moral compass. And they want to basically create a better world, a more ethical world. And we've seen our colleagues questioning everything from data ethics all the way to inclusivity policies to kind of reducing a business's carbon footprint. For example, like you see in this photo here, some employees are asking their employers to sign up to corporate electric scooter ride schemes, so there's less emissions. So even if you think that it doesn't matter, you yourself, let's say you're a business leader, the reality is the people that work for you or with you do care. So you should as well. We also need a positive culture because we spend more time at work than we do with our families. This is a photo of my firstborn baby before the pandemic. Obviously, this is from like 2016. But the reality is I used to bring the baby into work very, very frequently, because we spend so much time at work, even if we are on Zoom, we're still connected to our colleagues. So it's really important to kind of have this culture where we really enjoy being at work, because it's so kind of intertwined with family life, whether you work hybrids or in completely in the office, or even from Zoom. The reality is you're constantly, there'll be a window into your work world from home, and it's really important. So obviously, I said it before, a nation stays alive when its culture stays alive. It's similar for teams. If the culture is wrong, the team can always fall back on its culture and use its values and behaviors to guide their sort of, I guess, gut instincts when a strategy is lacking or failing. We've all seen strategies fail before. We've always seen plans kind of being disseminated. So this is why the culture is the single most important thing, because when something doesn't work, people will fall back on your culture as almost as a safety net. So a culture empowers when all else fails. And a good culture is based on a set of values, principles, pillars, and behaviors that define the collective behaviors of an organization. And it not only creates resilient individuals, a great culture creates resilient teams. So I'm sure many of you have heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's a very, very kind of well-known concept in psychology. But essentially, after physiological and safety needs, the third layer of human needs is actually belongingness. To belong is an emotional need for interpersonal relationships, being connected to a wider group. And if you don't feel like you belong, then you'll feel something called social exclusion. And what's interesting about social exclusion is it actually stimulates the same part of the brain that physical pain does, according to University of Michigan. So now that we understand why a culture is important, let's discuss how to build a culture. But first, let's summarize what a culture is. So in my words, and again, this is partially inspired by Wikipedia, but a company culture are the ideas, intellectual achievements, customs, and social behavior of a collective group of people. So what you can see here is actually Cyberduck's Slack random channels. I think that gives people a great snapshot, of our culture. Because it has things like, if you go through our random channel, you can see things like learning, fun, innovation, kind of inspiration, community spirit, where we're helping each others and the community around us. It also includes various kind of messages about inclusivity. Funnily enough, just yesterday, somebody at Cyberduck posted something about why can't we have, a 4-day a week work week, which is, again, a very kind of, it's becoming quite popular, right? I'm sure you've all heard of it before. So as opposed to kind of shutting the conversation down, it's actually something that I've asked the person who suggested it to come back with almost a vision piece of how they think it could work and how it would impact, obviously, ourselves and our clients. And just, again, it's a great idea to explore. And that's what essentially it is a culture. It's allowing people to come up with ideas and explore those ideas with the senior leaders without feeling kind of any sense of remorse, because all ideas should be discussed. So this is what I call the fishbowl approach to help you build a culture. So one of the first questions that you need to ask yourselves when you want to build your culture is, what do you want to see? What do you want to hear? So this is a sort of quite an old Glassdoor review. And of course, over the years, like any business, we've had, even at Cyberduck, we've had a fair share of challenges. So the first thing that a culture needs to do is listen. And even when we potentially disagree or think the comments aren't correct, we need to ask ourselves, what would we want this review to be like in 3 years from now? What do we need to change internally to make these reviews more positive? So of course, today we have some fantastic reviews, but the whole point is we have to constantly listen. Now, for me, inclusivity means that everyone is a potential hire. So when we get a CV, we need to consider every single person. Everybody should be listened to internally, empowered and safe. It not only results in a better society, but it results in better business performance. So there's loads of studies from the likes of Harvard Business Review, McKinsey's as well, that diverse teams perform much better. And to be really inclusive, we need to act and not just deliver tokenism. In June last year, during the tragic riots in America, I had just happened to speak, and it wasn't intentional, to a number of Black colleagues at Cyberduck about how they felt. And actually, the answer was they didn't feel good at all, even though it was happening in the other side of the world. Things were not good. So one of them in particular wrote a post on LinkedIn, and had a lot of positive support for what he wrote, but also a lot of negative comments and derogatory comments as well. So at Cyberduck, around 30% of our team is Black, 30% are non-British. So we're extremely diverse in our DNA. So what we decided to do was open the floor to everybody in the company together to talk about what was happening in America, talk about racism generally, what type of racism people have experienced. And then we put together a pledge to try and help change things. We put together a list of principles, which we're still working on. We're still continuing these open conversations and looking at gender diversity, neurodiversity, and lots of other aspects. And the other thing that I've always been doing at Cyberduck as part of our culture is doing good and giving back. So I just wanted to show you this quick video of some of the things that we've been doing over the years. And we literally do climb mountains for good causes. You'll see in a minute. So we've run like everything from coding clubs to going into impoverished communities to teach students, going to sort of doing lectures at universities. We used to run our own kind of physical meetup as well. Taking on sort of hackathons, contributing to kind of open source projects like obviously Drupal, and helping charities raise money, and literally climbing mountains. So this is one of our people at Cyberduck climbed a mountain to raise money for one of our charity partners. So at Cyberduck and in our business, we've embedded inclusivity into all of the pillars. So essentially, we have three pillars in the business. So the process at Cyberduck is really responsible for streamlining kind of all the qualitative research, the design thinking, and obviously the approach to development that we take. Obviously, because of how quickly digital is moving and how sort of clients want really innovative solutions that perform. Clearly, performance has to be one of our pillars. And this is kind of where, again, we constantly analyze the technologies and user behavior and data to ensure the right type of frameworks are applied. And the final pillar, again, obviously, I'm sure you're not surprised, is people. It's essential that we hire and promote the right type of people that share kind of our sense of urgency around the mission and purpose. And obviously, one of the things that we really try to achieve with all of our people is very good communication, clarity, and cultivation. So essentially, so they can then follow the process that delivers the right level of performance. So let's explore each pillar, and the first one is going to be the performance one. So part of being a sort of a highly performing organization just means that we need to be really informed and follow kind of data patterns. So this is a book that I read a couple of years before the pandemic called The Black Swan by Nassim Taleb. It talks all about how you just can't predict things that are going to happen in life and business. And essentially the pandemic was like one of those black swan events that nobody really predicted. So we had to quickly adapt and shift to a remote first model. And actually what happened is Cyberduck moved to being remote first 2 weeks before the official national lockdowns, at least in the UK. So I looked at what was happening in other countries, mainly kind of Italy, and we just decided, okay, that's it. We're closing our offices. Everybody should go home. And then what transpired is we'd need to find a new way to deliver our services. This is what a Cyberduck sort of workshop with clients used to look like. Lots of post-it notes, sitting down in meeting rooms. And then we had to essentially transform to something like this, essentially. So as you can see, it's a workshop that we ran with one of our clients, and you can see that the client loved it so much that they wanted to steal our kind of boards. So we continue to look at kind of how regulation was changing, how client requirements were changing during the pandemic, because obviously what was happening is there were things that were happening before COVID. Like, as you can see on the left-hand side, there was the core Web Vital stuff from Google, where websites had to become faster, quicker, load quickly. Then there was everything that was happening with the accessibility lawsuits. So where 50% of our clients were public sector clients and had a huge requirement to deliver accessible and inclusive design. And then, of course, we had to sort of continue to change how we deliver things like ethnography and do that remotely using kind of ethnographic research. So essentially, this obviously had an impact on the culture because the team were inspired by all of this innovation that we were putting into our services. I mean, of course, they were nervous about the pandemic, like everyone, but at least we could stimulate them with kind of a lot of exciting things that we were doing. We also revisited our marketing. So prior to the pandemic, this is an event from UX Alive that we used to run events like this in person. Now, obviously, we then asked ourselves, okay, how are we going to do this in this kind of new remote world? So we then started to move online using something called an account-based marketing model for all of our marketing, and ran, started to run webinars like this Drupal masterclass, and they actually performed really well. Of course, there was an element of trial and error, but typically we now run probably 1 or 2 of these webinars a month. So it's incredible how we transform. And the good thing about that in terms of the team is all of a sudden we had people who were able to talk at events, from their living room, as opposed to having to travel or commute. So it had a really kind of positive effect. And we got speakers that we never had before, all of a sudden wanting to talk at our events as well, which was really good. Probably one of the most important things is we had to change our leadership style in the last 18 months or so. So once the pandemic started, everybody was nervous. I was nervous. All the leadership team was nervous. Nobody really knew what was going to happen with business, right? And I'm sure all of you were nervous as well. So we basically were in a very good but strong position before the pandemic, very strong, both kind of from a sales, finance perspective. And we made ourselves a promise that we're not going to make anybody redundant. And actually what we're going to do is focus on three things: stability, growth, and togetherness. And that's how we're going to build a strong future. So what we essentially started to do is run weekly company announcement meetings of 1 hour. Prior to the pandemic, we used to have one meeting every 2 weeks that was, from memory, I think 25 minutes. So we kind of almost massively increased the amount of communication that we were having with the team. And we also made, what we did in those meetings is we started to present sales data, delivered revenue data. We started to even talk about profitability in front of all of the team to reassure them and make sure that everything is transparent. So like 95% of all the information became transparent to the whole team, which wasn't something that we were doing before, at least not those levels. And then we came up with a principle that actually clients as well are kind of nervous. They weren't sure how to communicate them. So a lot of our clients wouldn't even use Zoom before the pandemic. A lot of the meetings that we had were in-person meetings. Cyberduck, because we've been established for 16 years, I've had developers working remotely with me together. So we were very well set up as a business, kind of from a technical perspective before the pandemic, and already had something like 20% of our staff were in other countries, Portugal, Spain, Malta, Israel, America, Germany. We have people all over the world. So it was really good. And then we started to think, okay, what other processes can we systemize? How can we help the team with processes to make their lives richer? So instead of sending loads of messages backwards and forwards, we created even more checklists than what we had, dynamic checklists, where you don't have to use Slack or email and you can comment in the tool. So I think this is a snapshot from ClickUp, which is one of the tools that we use. So it just makes, again, lives easier, a happier team, clients are the more satisfied. all of those sort of things. So let's explore, the final pillar, which is obviously putting our people at the very center of what we do. So it's important to mention that according to research, the 100 best companies have a far better cumulative return than the other 3,000 businesses in this index. So it's a far better kind of return. So essentially, the cumulative return is the total change in the investment price over a set time. And I just wanted to play this video about why diversity is a superpower at Cyberduck.
Salut. Merhaba. Ciao.
Paoli.
Leho.
Ndewo.
Привет. Hello.
Salam. Alimbar.
Olá. Hello, que?
Nós somos o rosto por trás da agência digital Cyberduck.
به عنوان یک آژانس ما هم از کار فیزیکی و هم از دورکاری استقبال می‌کنیم.
Tal como muitos dos nossos clientes, somos uma equipe internacional e procuramos expandir, continuando a incluir pessoas de todo o mundo.
Aħna l-offiċini ġewwa Londra, Hertfordshire, Berlin, Portugal u kif ukoll fl-Amerika.
Inwe ndị dị iche iche, mana nwee omenala eji anabata onye ọbụla dị anyị mkpa.
И это не только создает атмосферу веселья и движа.
Y también nos permite trabajar con clientes en todas las partes del mundo.
E olhar para todos os nossos projetos através de uma infinidade de perspectivas.
Pour apporter des idées différentes et une meilleure compréhension.
再解決客戶針對佢哋自己嘅唔同受眾群體嘅調節事。
Porque o que nos faz individualmente diferentes é aquilo que nos faz coletivamente brilhantes.
Et un proverbe qu'on adore, du professeur canadien Georges Day, nous dit que
African, Kishel, Kiasheshel, Waefun, Ayerewa, Tele.
Eso es lo que nos esforzamos en conseguir.
Tussen ons praat ons meer as 25 verskillende tale. En vir meer as 1/4 van ons is Engels nie ons moedertaal nie.
استفدت عن كل موقف وجهين من ومناطق المفتاح بالزود ويشيوت وبفتحات الديالوج بين تربطين.
Entonces, si andas buscando a alguien que hable tu idioma, es muy posible que lo encuentres en
Cyberpato.
Cyberburo.
Kiberutki. Pato cibernético.
Papra cibernetica.
Cyberient.
les cybercanards.
Nos vemos.
So we continue to talk at Cyberduck about all topics that impact all of us. So from things like miscarriage and signing up to various kind of pledges to support, parents who are going through those sort of experiences, all the way to talking about events that impacting, like single women walking through London at nights. We brought all of these type of conversations into our company announcement meetings. So we don't just talk about work, we talk about lots of other topics and really trying to broaden our understanding. So this is where we sponsored Dyslexia Creates, which again, where we celebrate the neurodiversity and the superpowers that it brings to the team as well. Another thing that we also do at Cyberduck is when we welcome new ducks, we have something called a buddy system. We use a tool called Donut, which kind of automatically introduces people to other people kind of randomly. And we also pair people up with buddies. So this is like almost companions outside of their department that become their friends and just sort of help them. And essentially that and, Donut together, it helps to create water cooler moments when we're all sort of remote. We also started our own pub or virtual pub called the Duck and Crisp. So it's really, really fantastic. This is kind of where we're having a conversation talking about, Amiga 500s and our first computers as well. And then within the company announcement meeting, we have something called a culture corner as well, which is again, it just brings kind of like an icebreaker in where people can talk about other things besides work, and it really adds a lot of kind of human kind of dimension into what we do. And then the final kind of pillar that we're going to discuss is the process. So again, it's how we can have motivated and well-led kind of people delivering processes that work. And essentially processes are the engine of scaling a business. Without processes, business simply can't grow. Like, you might work well without a process if you're 2 or 3 people, but eventually as you hire more and more people, so we're kind of almost 100 now, you have to have really robust processes. And it's clear that happy people kind of are more motivated. So the key kind of words here is emotional intelligence. So look at the impact on an employee on the left-hand side when a leader doesn't show emotional intelligence compared to when they do. It's clearly a different kind of ball game completely. And the other important thing to mention is that unhappy people do not follow processes. So as you can see, the wrong type of treatment has on kind of people is quite profound. So to deliver better processes, we actually need happy people. And we spoke a lot about the lack of empathy in the previous slide, but even the best leader can get caught into a push for productivity. So you could be the most empathic leader in the world, you could still sometimes push too much productivity on your team and try and squeeze more and more work out of them. And as documented in like this 1970s classic, software projects in the mid to late 70s, they became too large and too complicated to be delivered by the existing system. Throwing in more people into these projects didn't help. So really, to gain more efficiency and a better culture, new systems were needed. And what actually happened is this gave kind of rise to the Agile Manifesto, Scrum, Kanban. So with kind of healthier output, staff have more time in their personal lives and don't have to kind of pit, you know, their professional lives and their work commitments against their personal lives. So that obviously can then create like a psychological torment where people are torn between their personal stuff that's happening at home and the professional world as well. So this is kind of where having really clever systems and management systems is important. In an asynchronous world, a team is able to focus on deliver quality thinking and work in their own time. Essentially what this means is communication. Asynchronous work means that communication is not immediate. People respond when it's convenient and outside of meetings. Meetings can still, happen and obviously should happen. But yeah, I mean, there's essentially more focus time to create sort of very, very well crafted, written kind of notes where people can act on data as opposed to having a meeting to talk about literally every single thing. And again, meeting, one of my favorite subjects, and I'm a big fan of kind of some of the Amazon kind of meeting rules. If you don't know what that is, just sort of Google it. But at CyberDuck, we kind of conduct regular meeting analysis sessions where we actually analyze how many people are having how many meetings, whether the meetings are important, the length of the meetings, the frequency, and when we can potentially reduce the amount of meetings. Clearly, there's a big difference between like a 5-minute kind of meeting that you have with a colleague just to check something to a 1-hour meeting with 18 people. So, it's really important to understand what type of meetings you have, who needs to attend, and what can actually happen asynchronously. And I think it's absolutely critical that when people are communicating using something like Slack, that there is kind of an etiquette. I mean, I say that Slack is like the neural network at CyberDuck. It's essentially, it sends all the signals from everyone to everyone, really. We send hundreds of messages a day. So this is kind of why it's really important to have etiquettes on how to kind of communicate, how to write sort of concisely as well. And then in a scaling business where asynchronous communication is spreading, it's absolutely important to have a really strong wiki or knowledge base. So we use Notion. Pretty much every single department kind of uses Notion to run their departments. It has obviously all the documentation, processes, Kanban, Gantt charts, calendar functions, to just sort of manage interdepartmental objectives. So the whole business plan is actually is kind of managed on Notion. We do use another tool called ClickUp for kind of project management, but we use Notion as our wiki. And then we use town halls to communicate essentially how kind of processes work. So we don't just document things and put them on Notion. We'll then have like a live town hall every week. So every single team has these kind of town halls where we basically talk about things, and we bring in guests. Like in this instance here, we brought Dries in to talk about some of the latest and greatest developments in the world of Drupal. And we got all of our Drupal team to basically, and a couple of others from the business to come in and listen to Dries. So we also, in a kind of similar way, we also run lunch and learns. So basically, it's a great way to, again, communicate what's happening on different projects. So people can sort of disseminate, explain, and kind of pollinate knowledge. And people can watch it using kind of video afterwards as well if they can't attend. And then we use kind of, so this is quite an interesting tool that we've started to use recently called Progression App, where essentially we can, because one of the things that came up in feedback is that we need to improve the feedback loop in the business. So how kind of we report back to the team on how well they're doing or where they need to improve. So this is kind of where this progression framework is absolutely fantastic, where we essentially set kind of targets for them to understand different processes. We set targets around human skills like, empathy, and we set targets around hard skills like, Drupal coding or front-end coding or user research. So we went from the NPS score over to something called Friday Pulse, where we measure happiness levels. This is just one particular chart from one particular department. It's essentially a safe environment where every person, because what essentially happens, as well as getting the data, we have weekly meetings with each department to listen to them and to hear from them. And we can basically take all of the themes and act on them. So, as I mentioned, whilst we become remote first, we have something called a hybrid culture now, where some people are coming into our offices. So essentially, we use all sorts of innovative tools to kind of reduce the churn on people and reduce friction. So basically, people can book desks straight from Slack directly. And they can see which colleagues are going into the offices, physical offices. So obviously we have a number of different offices. They also have to fill in quick kind of questionnaires, like do they have a temperature, just for sort of health and safety. And another sort of quite innovative tool that we have around our people is essentially celebrating the process. So we have a kudos system. We use a really great HR tool called Hi Bob. But essentially we run kind of kudoses to kind of celebrate basically when the team do deliver a process very successfully, or a client kind of compliments the process. So we constantly run surveys with our clients to find out how well we're doing. So if the client comes back with a big praise, we'll run a kudos as well. So just wanted to wrap up now and just conclude. I'm just conscious of time. So a healthy culture needs to be visionary, but also measured. So obviously we saw Friday Pulse and stuff like that. Obviously growth and scale is always a challenge. And asynchronous kind of working is great, but it needs to constantly sort of evolve, measured and communicated. Good people follow processes, great people reinvent processes. So, having kind of robust processes in your business is going to be absolutely key. And one of the key areas that we're still continuing to improve on is inclusivity and how we can further improve diversity. And then don't forget to have that progression framework with your team as well. It's, for us, one of the main pieces of feedback we had from our team is that they want better feedback loops. So that's something that we're working hard on to kind of improve at the moment. So I'm sure you've seen these sort of slides before in terms of the contributions. And obviously, yeah, I'd love to hear back and get feedback on what you liked or didn't like about my talk as well. So please go to the schedule. And I'd just like to thank all of you for listening, as well as the team at CyberDuck and Joanne, who's helped me so much. So I'm just going to stop screen sharing now and turn on the video, stop screen sharing. Yeah, hope all is good. So I'm not sure if we have time for questions. Cool. So let me just look at the chat. Oh yeah, there's one question about Brexit. So yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, so Brexit had a huge impact on the workforce here at CyberDuck. Absolutely, you know, massive impact. So what essentially happened is after Brexit, we had a huge reduction in the amount of European people applying for jobs. So we used to have a much higher European kind of percentage of people working in CyberDuck before Brexit, at least in the UK. A lot of people would come from European countries and live in the UK and get jobs at CyberDuck. That stopped the minute that, and it didn't stop because people couldn't come. It stopped because people didn't want to come. They didn't feel welcome as they used to, which was kind of quite heartbreaking. So my wife is French, so I could see how she was feeling. You know, she was feeling wasn't feeling good about the whole Brexit thing, and neither was I. And then what we did is we started to hire people directly in European countries, either as contractors or through partners. And now, funnily enough, we actually have a higher European percentage of staff than what we used to before Brexit. So that's I guess the irony. So all in all, it was a good result for us. You know, I was never a fan of Brexit. I don't still feel that it was the wrong decision, you know, for the UK. But at least I'm pragmatic. You know, what's happened. It's now about moving forward, right?
Hello, Danny. Sorry to interrupt, but we are running out of time.
Okay, great stuff, guys. So yeah, great to talk to all of you, and see you soon.